Rain poured heavily over the courthouse steps that morning, washing the dust from the marble columns and painting the sky in shades of gray. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Every bench was filled, lawyers, reporters, townsfolk, all whispering about the case that had gripped the city for weeks. At the center of it all sat three siblings, Aisha, Malik, and Kofi, their eyes fixed on the grand wooden doors that would soon open to reveal the man who would decide their mother's fate. Their clothes were modest, their faces drawn from sleepless nights and worry. They had come not just to defend their mother, but to fight for her dignity. Their mother, Mama Zuri, lay in a hospital bed miles away, fragile, pale, and unaware that her life's legacy hung in the balance. She had once been the most respected midwife in their small African town, delivering babies for rich and poor alike, asking for nothing but prayers in return. But now, accused of a crime she didn't commit, the theft of the late billionaire Tund Afalayan's fortune, her name was being dragged through the mud. When the heavy doors finally creaked open, the courtroom fell silent. The judge entered, tall, commanding, his robe flowing like a river of authority. His name was Justice Adewale, a billionaire in his own right, known for his ruthless honesty and iron will. Rumor had it that no one could sway him. But as his eyes met the three siblings, something in his expression softened for just a fraction of a second. Malik clenched his fists as the prosecutor began his fiery speech, painting Mama Zuri as a cunning thief who had manipulated an old man into changing his will. The words cut like knives, and Aisha's tears flowed freely. When it was finally their turn, Aisha stood, her voice trembling but clear. "Your Honor," she began, "our mother has never taken a coin that wasn't hers. She brought Mr. Afalayan into this world. Yes, the same man they claim she stole from. He told us, before he passed, that she was the only person who ever treated him like a human being, not like a wallet." The room stirred. Even the prosecutor blinked, taken aback. Justice Adewale leaned forward. "You're saying," he said slowly, "that your mother delivered Mr. Afalayan at birth?" "Yes, Your Honor," Malik replied. "She's been serving this town since before you or I could walk. Every child here owes her something, even the rich ones." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. Then Justice Adewale removed his glasses and looked at them deeply. "And yet," he murmured, "no one stood by her when she fell." Kofi, the youngest, could no longer hold back. "We are standing, sir, even if it costs us everything." The judge's gaze lingered on the boy, his courage, his trembling lip, his sincerity. Slowly, Justice Adewale rose from his seat, his voice heavy with something no one had ever heard from him before, emotion. "You remind me," he said, "of my own mother. She too was accused once, by those who feared her strength." He turned to the courtroom, his tone sharp now, echoing through the hall. "We build empires and forget those who built us. We honor the rich, but mock the hands that fed us when we were poor. Shame on us all." Gasps filled the room. Even the prosecutor lowered his head. But the storm outside only grew stronger. Thunder rolled, as if the heavens themselves were listening. Justice Adewale took a deep breath and spoke again, softer this time. "I will review this case personally," he said, "not as a judge, but as a son." And for the first time in years, the man known as the billionaire judge blinked back tears. The siblings glanced at one another, unsure whether to hope or fear. Somewhere beyond those walls, in a dimly lit hospital room, Mama Zuri stirred, her heart sensing that something powerful was unfolding in her name. As the judge rose to leave, a folded letter slipped from the case file on his desk, addressed to him, written in a delicate, shaky hand. It bore Mama Zuri's signature. He froze. Slowly, he reached down and opened it, his eyes scanning the faded ink. With each word, his breath quickened, his face paling. The room waited, silent, as the rain began to ease outside, replaced by a single ray of sunlight that pierced the gray. Justice Adewale whispered something under his breath, something no one else could hear. Then he looked up at the three children, his voice barely steady. "Your mother," he began. But his words caught in his throat as the truth struck him harder than any verdict could. The hospital corridors were silent except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the soft patter of footsteps as the entourage entered. The billionaire judge, his clerks, the three siblings, and the once arrogant Bode Afolayan now reduced to a trembling shadow of himself. The rain had stopped, but its scent lingered, mixing with the sterile air of the ward. The moment they stepped inside, the nurses froze. Never before had the nation's most powerful judge walked into a public hospital. Mama Zuri's room was small, barely large enough to hold them all. She lay on a narrow bed, her face pale but peaceful, her breathing shallow. Her hands, once strong and skilled, now rested weakly atop a faded blanket. When her eyes fluttered open, they were met not with fear, but with quiet recognition. "My children," she whispered, her voice frail but tender. "Why are there so many people here?" Aisha rushed to her side, tears already falling. "Mama, it's over," she said softly. "We brought the truth. You're free." Justice Adewale stepped forward slowly, his heart heavy with emotion. "Mama Zuri," he began, his voice breaking the silence. "You may not remember me, but I remember you. You saved my life when I was just a baby. You told my mother that I would grow to serve justice. Today, I am here because of you." Her tired eyes blinked in confusion at first, then recognition dawned. "Adewale," she whispered. "Little Adewale." The judge nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks, something no one in the room had ever seen before. "Yes, Mama, it's me. And now it is my turn to stand for you, as you once stood for me." The room seemed to tremble with emotion. Malik's chest swelled with pride, and Kofi's small hand clung to his sister's arm, as if afraid that this moment might vanish like a dream. Bode Afolayan stood in the corner, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Gone was the swagger, the arrogance. The truth had stripped him bare. Justice Adewale turned to him, his voice low but commanding. "Step forward." Bode hesitated, then obeyed, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the bedside, he dropped to his knees. The siblings tensed, unsure what he would do, but he only lowered his head. "Mama Zuri," he said hoarsely, "I wronged you. I accused you of things you never did. I was greedy and blind. Please forgive me." The old woman's eyes softened, and a small, sad smile curved her lips. "Son," she whispered, "I forgive you. But promise me one thing. Never build your wealth on another person's tears." Bode broke down, his sobs echoing through the quiet room. It was a sound no one expected from a man like him, raw, stripped of pride. Justice Adewale placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let this be your sentence," he said gently. "To live every day remembering the mercy of the one you tried to destroy." Outside, the clouds began to part, letting golden sunlight stream through the window, spilling across Mama Zuri's bed like a blessing. She turned her gaze toward the light, her lips moving in silent prayer. "You see, children," she murmured weakly, "truth may sleep, but it never dies. It wakes when the time is right." Her words hung in the air, wrapping around everyone like a sacred promise. The reporters who had followed the convoy stood outside the door, filming the scene through the small glass window. Within hours, the story would spread across the nation. The billionaire judge who left his courtroom to defend the woman who saved him. It would touch millions, reminding them that no amount of wealth or power could stand higher than gratitude and justice. But for those in that room, it wasn't just a story, it was redemption made real. Justice Adewale ordered that all charges against Mama Zuri be dropped immediately. He also instructed the court to restore her seized property and compensate her for the humiliation she endured. But when he turned back to her, she only shook her head weakly. "I don't need their money," she whispered. "Just let me go home, to my garden. Let me feel the soil again." Her children wept quietly, promising they would take her there as soon as she regained strength. But then her breathing faltered slightly, and the doctor moved closer, checking her pulse. A hush fell again. "Mama," Aisha whispered, holding her mother's hand tightly. "Stay with us. We still need you." Mama Zuri's eyes met hers, eyes full of peace. "My dear, I have done my part. You will carry the rest." Her voice grew fainter, but her smile widened. "Adewale," she said softly, "you fulfilled the prophecy. You stood for justice, just as I said." Tears rolled down the judge's face freely now. "You gave me life," he whispered, "and I promise, your name will never be forgotten." She nodded faintly, her hand trembling in his. Then, with a final deep breath, Mama Zuri's eyes closed, her lips still curved in that serene, forgiving smile. The monitor gave one long, steady tone. Aisha broke down first, wailing softly. Malik bowed his head, his tears silent. Kofi clung to the blanket, whispering, "Mama, please wake up." Justice Adewale's knees gave way as he sank beside the bed. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he reached out, touching her hand gently, his voice cracking. "You have delivered your last soul, Mama. Rest now." The entire ward was silent. Even the nurses stood with their hands clasped, heads bowed. It was as if the world itself had paused to honor the passing of a woman whose life had quietly shaped destinies. Moments later, the sunlight intensified, flooding the room in warm, golden light. No one moved. It felt as if her spirit had filled the space, wrapping them all in peace. After a long silence, Justice Adewale stood, his face solemn but resolute. "She will have a burial fit for a queen," he said firmly. "Not because of her wealth, but because of her worth." Days later, the entire city gathered on the hilltop where Mama Zuri had once lived. Her small home overlooked the field she loved, now covered in white flowers brought by people from every corner of the land, rich and poor alike. The judge himself stood beside her children, not in his robe of power, but in simple white attire. As the coffin was lowered into the earth, he stepped forward, holding a single seed in his palm. He dropped it gently into the soil and said, "She planted kindness wherever she went. Today, we plant her memory, that it may grow in every heart." The crowd murmured prayers as the wind carried the scent of blossoms across the hill. Birds circled overhead, their wings catching the light like fragments of hope. In the months that followed, Justice Adewale established the Mama Zuri Foundation, dedicated to helping widows, midwives, and poor mothers across the nation. He funded hospitals and schools in her name, ensuring her compassion would outlive all of them. Aisha became a nurse, following in her mother's footsteps. Malik studied law under a scholarship provided by the judge himself, determined to protect the innocent as his mother had been protected. Kofi, still young, would often visit the garden they rebuilt near her grave, the one she had always dreamed of returning to. Each time the wind passed through the leaves, it carried her voice, soft, loving, eternal. Truth may sleep, but it never dies. And people remembered. For years to come, her story was told not just as a tale of justice, but as a legend of a mother's love that crossed the boundaries of power and time, of children who refused to let her be forgotten, and of a billionaire judge who learned that true riches lie not in gold or titles, but in gratitude. Even after decades, children in the town would point to the grand hospital built in her name, the Zuri Memorial Hospital, and say, "That's where the judge cried." And those who knew the story would nod quietly, their hearts warmed by the reminder that sometimes the most powerful judgments are written not in courts, but in hearts. For in the end, Mama Zuri had done what she had always done. She had delivered life. Not just once, not just to the judge she saved, but to generations who would now grow in a world made gentler by her kindness. And somewhere, beyond the golden clouds, her spirit watched, smiling, proud, eternal. "Your mother saved my life," Justice Adewale finally breathed, his voice trembling as though the weight of years had suddenly crashed down upon him. A stunned murmur rippled through the courtroom. Aisha blinked in disbelief. Malik leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Kofi's small hand tightened around his sister's arm. "What do you mean, Your Honor?" Aisha asked softly. The judge didn't answer right away. Instead, he sank slowly back into his chair, the letter trembling in his grasp. His eyes, once sharp with authority, now glistened with something fragile, remembrance. He took a deep breath, his words quiet, almost reverent. "I was a sickly boy," he began. "Born in a poor district, before my family knew wealth. The doctor said I wouldn't live to see my first birthday. But there was a woman, a midwife, who refused to let me die. She sat by my mother's bedside all night, praying, singing, feeding me herbs she'd grown herself. She said, "This child will stand for justice one day." He paused, staring at the handwriting on the paper. "That woman," he whispered, "was Mama Zuri." The air left the room as though the world itself had stopped spinning. Even the bailiff, usually expressionless, looked shaken. Aisha covered her mouth in shock. Malik's eyes filled with sudden, burning pride. "My mother," Malik muttered. "She never told us that." Justice Adewale let out a faint, broken laugh. I doubt she remembers. It was more than 40 years ago. I was just another baby she saved. But she gave me life, and now, all these years later, her life stands in my hands. The irony, it's unbearable. The courtroom was utterly silent. The reporters had lowered their pens. The prosecutor's face was pale. Then, softly, the judge stood again. "Bring me the full record of this case," he ordered. "Every document. Every witness statement. No shortcuts." As clerks scrambled to obey, his gaze returned to the three siblings. "Tell me everything," he said. "How did this accusation begin?" Aisha stepped forward, gathering her courage. After Mr. Afolayan's death, a man named Bode, his nephew, claimed Mama tricked him into signing a new will. He said she took advantage of him because he was sick. But, Your Honor, that's not true. Mama took care of him when everyone else abandoned him. She was the only one who stayed by his bedside till he took his last breath. Malik added, "We didn't even know about any will until Bode came with police. They raided our home, took Mama's savings, her records, everything. She fainted that day. She hasn't recovered since." Justice Adewale clenched his jaw. "Bode Afolayan," he muttered. "The one who's been suing half the family for inheritance rights." "Yes, sir," Aisha replied bitterly. "He wants everything. The houses, the land, the money. He even said he'd make sure our mother dies in shame." For the first time, a flash of anger crossed the judge's eyes. "Not while I draw breath," he said quietly. He turned to his clerk. "Summon Bode Afolayan immediately. If he refuses, issue a warrant. I want him in this courtroom before sunset." Aisha and Malik exchanged stunned glances. Things were moving faster than they could process. Meanwhile, the judge's fingers brushed the edge of the letter again. He could almost see Mama Zuri, younger, stronger, her voice full of compassion. He remembered the song she used to hum that night, when he was just a fragile infant fighting for life. The melody haunted him now, rising faintly in his mind above the silence. The rain outside had stopped completely. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colors across the floor, crimson, gold, emerald, as though heaven itself was painting justice upon the room. Kofi, unable to hold back, asked timidly, "Your Honor, will Mama be free?" The question hung in the air. Justice Adewale looked at the boy, his heart tightening. "If truth still matters," he said, "then yes." He stepped down from the bench, something no one had ever seen him do during a session. Crossing the courtroom floor, he stood before the siblings, lowering himself to Kofi's height. "You've done what few would dare," he said softly. "You've stood for your mother with nothing but courage. Hold on to that. The world may forget good people, but justice never does." The boy nodded, his lip trembling. Aisha brushed a tear from her cheek. Moments later, the heavy doors opened again. Gasps filled the room as Bode Afolayan entered, flanked by his lawyers. Tall, well-dressed, his watch gleaming, he carried himself with arrogance, until he saw the expression on the judge's face. "Mr. Afolayan," Justice Adewale said coldly, "you've been accused of presenting false evidence in this court. Would you like to explain yourself before I proceed?" Bode hesitated, then smirked. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this woman," he began, but the judge's hand shot up. "Asterisk that woman asterisk," the judge interrupted sharply, "is the reason I'm standing here today. Choose your next words carefully." The room exploded in whispers. Bode's confidence faltered, his smirk fading. I don't understand," he stammered. "You don't have to," the judge said. "You will, however, answer my questions truthfully. Did you forge your uncle's signature on the will documents?" Bode's lawyers exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered urgently, "Don't answer that." Justice Adewale slammed his gavel once, the sound echoing like thunder. "I asked a question." Bode swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't forge anything." The judge motioned to a clerk, who brought forward a folder. "Then you won't mind if I read the handwriting analysis report submitted yesterday." He opened it, his eyes scanning the page. "According to this report, the signature on the alleged will is not Mr. Afolayan's. It is yours." Gasps. Cameras clicked. Someone in the back muttered a prayer. Bode's face went pale. "That's impossible," he shouted. "Silence," the judge warned. "You've built this entire accusation on lies. Lies that nearly destroyed a woman who once served this nation with love and honor." Do you deny visiting her home the night before the will surfaced? Bode hesitated again. Sweat trickled down his temple. I went to steal, Malik interjected fiercely. You came with your men and tore our home apart. You thought no one saw you. Bode spun toward him. You watch your mouth, boy. Enough. Justice Adewale's voice roared through the room. This courtroom will not become a playground for bullies. For a moment, Bode's lips quivered, his arrogance collapsing under the weight of exposure. He looked around, desperate for support, but the room had turned against him. Even his lawyers began to pack their papers in silence. Justice Adewale's gaze darkened. You'll face the consequences of your actions. But more importantly, you'll make this right, today. Bode's knees nearly buckled. What do you mean? I mean, said the judge, you will go to the hospital. You will face Mama Zuri herself, and you will beg forgiveness. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, others murmured approval. Aisha's eyes widened. Your Honor, Mama is too weak to even speak. Then she will hear, the judge replied. And I will be there too. He turned to the bailiffs. Prepare the transport. We're taking this hearing to the hospital. For a moment, it seemed unreal. The most powerful judge in the country leaving his courtroom to stand by a poor, bedridden woman. But no one dared question him. As everyone hurried to follow, the siblings looked at one another, hearts pounding. The truth was finally coming to light. And somewhere far away, as if sensing the shifting winds of fate, Mama Zuri stirred once more in her hospital bed, her lips moving faintly, whispering a prayer she had whispered many times before. God of truth, she murmured weakly, let justice find its way. And as the sound of footsteps and distant sirens filled the air, the light outside grew brighter. The storm had passed, but something far greater was just beginning to unfold.